Right, thank you for inviting me this afternoon. Very, very pleased to be back in Birmingham again. I'm already working with Larissa in my new role at Cambridge Rare Disease Network, and it was lovely to hear yesterday afternoon, Tim, what you're doing together, and hope we can collaborate further. So forgive me if I go back in time with you, probably I think 38 years now. But we'll start with this nice, smiley photograph. And why are we all smiling? We're smiling because we've actually got a diagnosis for our children. There's my husband, John, and there's Matthew, he's 18, and Charlotte's 15. And they're just diagnosed, and we're also equally happy because we're flying off to America, because the only place that knew anything about Alström Syndrome was with Jan Marshall, rest in peace, and the Jackson Laboratory in Maine, USA, who were researching the condition. So although we got a diagnosis, there was no information and nobody knew anything about it here. So if we go back to the beginning, you'll see that everything seemed really quite normal about Matthew's birth. But the only sign that anything was wrong was that nystagmus was present. His eyes wobbled up and down, and he didn't like the light. So I'd be interested, Larissa, at what point you think children might be referred to your new rare disease centre, and whether wobbly eyes might be a sign that something's very wrong. So we did actually take him to the GP, who referred us to an ophthalmologist. He was a very grumpy chap who wanted me to hold this wriggly baby up to the bright lights, which he hated, so he buried his head in his chest and was very uncooperative. And a very grumpy man said, it may be ocular albinism, he's a bit too wriggly to examine, or I may have contacted a virus whilst I was pregnant. Matthew was also diagnosed with a congenital dislocation of his right hip at 18 months. That hadn't been picked up previously because when we said that he tried to walk, they said, well, he doesn't see very well, so he might fall over more often, but actually it was his hip. I think we had one session with a genetic counsellor, and my GP's advice was have another baby, so you won't worry about this one very much. Matthew was seen at Moorfields when he was 3 and diagnosed with cone rod dystrophy, which was a correct diagnosis actually, but you'll see how my children were very much divided into individual components of their disease, albeit they were very happy, and Matthew liked water, and you'll see later on that he took this even further as he got older. And in the other picture, they've enough sight at this point that they're raiding my husband's vegetable garden, so they could find food. So we went along and had Charlotte, once again a normal birth, and I know exactly the day that the nystagmus was present because I saw it, and she was 7 weeks old, and it wasn't present before that, because I can assure you I was looking for it intently. But Charlotte collapsed in heart failure at 11 weeks, which was at that time thought to be caused by a virus, and she was given a life expectancy of 2 years. You can see that she lasted longer because at 6 she was found to have a hearing loss. And interesting, you can compare this with Matthew, whose hearing loss didn't develop until he was 21. And he was regularly tested for hearing. The biggest bane of my life was the paediatrician, because he kept telling me all the time there was no connection between the symptoms that my children had. And I just thought, well, nobody can be just so unlucky. So we just had to keep carrying on, finding different doctors as and when we could. This is really, really sad, this last sentence, because the heart specialist felt there was no need to look at Matthew's heart because Charlotte's heart had been caused by a virus. So then we got this relative moratorium period where not a lot happened. they'd still got their sight problems, their weight's very difficult to maintain. Charlotte's very thirsty. She gets told off at school for drinking all the juice as soon as she sits down at the table at schools. And really, we become very blasé about diagnosis because every time we got a new eye specialist, they gave us a new diagnosis. So you can see there we had ocular albinism, retinitis pigmentosa, and Alström syndrome. So we kind of let those wash over our heads somewhat because, as Tim said, you're very busy with 2 children who've got very many problems, and Matthew's very bright, passes 11 plus, and we had a huge fight with our local authority to get him to the only grammar school for blind children at that time, which was RNIB New College in Worcester. And then you can see we were very close. Lots of people used to think they were twins, actually. So Matthew collapsed in heart failure at 16 and was actually given 24 hours to live when he collapsed. But actually that collapse with the heart failure really triggered the doctors re-looking at their condition, and 18 months later he's diagnosed then both children actually with Leber's amaurosis, which turned out to be quite serendipitous really, because they had only that diagnosis for a short time before I got a letter through my door saying that there was a consultant at Great Ormond Street, Miss Isabel Russell-Eggett as she was then, who was looking at cases of Leber's amaurosis and would we take the children to London and be seen. Well, my husband was a bit grumpy about this because we'd already had 4 diagnoses and he was a bit, not another one. So anyway, I managed to get him to take us up to London. And this was when Isabel Russell-Eggett, very good consultant, and to give me the diagnosis, she took me to the pub around the corner and sat me down and gave me a drink. And she said, I wish there were a few more like her. And she said, it's not Leber's amaurosis, it's actually Alström Syndrome. And then when we went back from the pub, she had a huge chart in her office wall of 22 patients that she'd monitored with Alström Syndrome. And she said, does this make sense to you? So there was everything that the children had, the wobbly eyes, the light sensitivity, the fact that they were getting overweight, the heart failure. And it was her who said, your children will probably be diabetic and you'll need to get them checked when you go home, which we did, of course, and they were. And I think Charlotte probably had been diabetic for quite a number of years. Looking back, she'd got the very dark acanthus nigricans patches. She'd be the one very, very thirsty all of the time. And you'll see in a minute the additional problems she got urologically. So what difference does it make to have a correct diagnosis? Even we'd become blasé about it. Well, the difference it made for us was we found the International Society of Alström Families. And really, this was the first time in 18 years I could speak to another mother about the disease. And I can't stress enough to you how important it is that peer-to-peer, parent-to-parent, able to talk, because only another parent will understand exactly what you've gone through. And it was Sandra Surratt, and she even had her daughter had been told that the heart condition was a virus as well. So just to talk to somebody else and find you haven't been going crazy over these years, there is a connection and a diagnosis. So when Isabel diagnosed our children, she knew of 12 families in the UK. And she wrote to the 12 families for us. And we got 7 of them back together. They came to the Berryhead Hotel in Brixham. And we started the Alström charity. The first year we didn't have any doctors there, but quickly John and I could see that there were many of the families who'd got a diagnosis who actually weren't being treated for some of the symptoms that we knew may arise, and were clearly talking to us about symptoms that we knew meant they'd got other aspects of the disease developing. So we actually invited the doctors who'd worked with Matthew and Charlotte to the next clinic. And I always remember the audiologist would come in and commandeer a bedroom and have a hearing test conducted in the hotel bedrooms. But really it was good both round. The doctors learnt more about the disease together, and we could start to develop better care. Key was the website. A colleague of mine from work set up the Alström Syndrome website, and we also began to develop family support. So all this was done really whilst from my back bedroom I was working full-time at the National Lottery Charities Board, and the children's problems seemed to be ever increasing. So really for Matthew, collapsing at 16 was a death sentence. You know, his heart condition had been left to the worst possible state. And he actually collapsed at 21 in Germany. His GP decided to reduce his medicine, unbeknown to us. Before he was just about to fly off to Germany, he could speak fluent German, and he collapsed in hospital in Germany. Now, interestingly, doctors in Germany told us when he was 21 that he should have a heart transplant. So when we came home, we paid privately for him to go up to the leading dialysis cardiomyopathy doctor in London, who said, I don't think he needs a heart transplant yet because we've got pacemakers that we think will help. But after the third pacemaker being fitted, we thought, this is not really working. And all that happened with Matthew, if you gave him a pacemaker, he did twice as much. So he put twice as much pressure on an already damaged heart. So actually I rang Papworth myself, and I was very fortunate that the consultant at Papworth always answers his phone himself. He doesn't have a secretary. And I really just went through what I'd gone through with you here, and he said, I want to see him. So we went up to Papworth, and he was actually top of the list that day. He'd been left that long that there was nobody more serious in the country than him. The transplant doctors would have liked to have seen him 12 months earlier, but nobody referred him. In fact, we were told, because he was diabetic, that he wouldn't even be considered for a transplant. And his first offer of a heart is received 4 hours after going on the transplant list. We'd actually gone down there, and at midnight they said it's not suitable, we're not going to use that. But they did ask us to stay, and 2 days later we received a heart. But it was all too late, as you can see. He lived a week following. His kidneys failed rapidly. So I told you he liked water. So the whole reason he wanted a heart transplant was that he could no longer get insurance to go sailing, which was his absolute passion. He raced. He wanted to go from the Isle of Wight to France, and he couldn't get the insurance. So he said, what can we do? So that's why he wanted the heart transplant. So Charlotte, and I've just been talking to Tim to find out the moment we met each other. And I met Tim because at 19, Charlotte started having urological problems, and nobody that I was working with knew anything about it or what to do. And in fact, the gynecologist she was under said she's blind and she's just not very clean. So anyway, I did a web search and I actually found Tim and Alström syndrome, and that these children with Alström syndrome had symptoms very similar to what Charlotte was experiencing. And that's how I met Tim. He said, you need to take it to a Professor Ball in London. That's who I take my Alström children to. So we did. And he was excellent, he knew exactly what it was, and he started directing our local Torbay hospital on what to do for Charlotte. And she had an operation for an illeal conduit. But at 27, her kidneys failed. They'd really been put under lots of pressure, I think, with the diabetes not being diagnosed, and the illeal conduit itself creates lots of urological problems and infections. Sadly, she was put on dialysis, which is horrendous. My heart goes out to anybody who has kidney dialysis regular. It's wretched, the needles hurt. She would sit on the step in tears, not wanting to go. But not only that, we were told that she could only have 3 dialysis sessions a week. So after 5 episodes of pulmonary edema, because her heart actually couldn't cope with the fluid, we finally managed to get 4 sessions of dialysis a week, by which time the damage was well and truly done to her heart. So she was referred here, we came here to Birmingham for a combined heart and kidney transplant. There were many obstacles to even getting her on the list. So if you're not on the list, you're not going to get a heart or a kidney. So I think we were, easily a year delay before she went on the transplant list. And we did. We got a call 2 o'clock in the morning to say that her heart and kidney was available. She was absolutely ecstatic about it. She had a fiancé. She was hoping to get married. And she wanted to be well. And she also said, "Mum, it's win-win. I'm either going to be well enough to get married or I'll be with my brother, so I can't lose." And sadly, as my husband and I knew, we never thought she would be strong enough to survive the operation, and she didn't. And she never walked from surgery, and I'm thankful that she didn't, because they weren't able to do the kidney transplant. And had she walked and known that she was still going to be on dialysis, she just wouldn't have wanted that. So here she is with her fiancé, Andre, and John and I were very pleased to be invited to Andre's wedding just 2 weeks ago. He said very much that Charlotte was in his heart and always would be in his heart, and we are absolutely delighted that he's gone on and married a lookalike of Charlotte. So, perceptions. Well, not what we thought children were going to be like, for sure. But equally, not at all what we expected hospitals to be like. Multiple hospital visits. I got my law degree in the waiting room because I was so angry when I was sat there. I used to think, what can I do? So I thought, I'm going to be a lawyer. They seem to get things done. So, and also since I was fighting so many appeals for benefits and schools, and I just thought, I might as well go and learn how to do it. So, as I say, no information about the disease, even when they were diagnosed. My husband's handbook had more information about his car than I could find. No medical expertise, care pathway, or knowledge of what should be tested with the children. And in fact, my children's care was accident and emergency. They collapsed in heart failure. Charlotte collapsed in kidney failure. In fact, that was a trigger to move the clinics to Queen Elizabeth Hospital. We had an NHS with no protocols for treating this, and no social care packages. Oh, and attitude. What has this mother thought of next? You can see it. So, Martha and Charlotte, greatly ahead of their time, trailblazers. It was absolutely their wonderful personalities that engaged the doctors to become not only involved with them, but with the other children that came along. The multidisciplinary clinics were set up on the backs of their experience. The medical handbook was written following everything that had happened to them, because nobody knew what had happened to them before. So the National Commissioning Group funded, it was actually the Department of Health who I had to fight, because they said they didn't fund charities, but we managed to get them to fund the charity. We also got lots of grants, and it did help that after I got my degree, I went to work for the National Motor Charities Board, so that comes in quite handy, writing grants. We founded Alström Syndrome UK in 1998. As I said, we did the website, the patient information, and medical handbook, organised the multiple disciplinary clinics, got the funding, and in 2013, Alström UK was awarded Eurord as the Patient Organisation of the Year. So today we've moved on. My husband and I are just back from Madrid from Alström Europe meeting with medical and scientific professionals. We are taking Prometic's drug that my husband and I fought through with the doctors to be trialled here in the UK. It's now being trialled in Italy. We're hoping to trial it in Spain, and I've just been talking with Poland this week, and Poland hope to start trialling the drug as well. So my new job, which I absolutely love, I get 6 PhD students from Cambridge University, bright as anything, to work with me each term. And now we're working, along with Larissa, developing a pilot service. We want to develop a home noise support system, similar to what Macmillan does for cancer patients, for rare disease patients. So we've had Cambridge Consultancy Network working in 2 terms on the evidence of need for the project, and we have partners now with Cambridge Hospitals and Birmingham Health Partners looking at a 2-centre pilot. I've just been getting the consortia group together. Next week in Cambridge we've got our 2nd International Rare Disease Summit. There's a few places left, I think, and discounts for patient groups. But at this meeting we're initiating, you had Tim say, and I'm fortunate that in Cambridge we've got the largest biotech cluster in Cambridge, who we've worked with very closely. They're the biggest sponsors of this event, and in fact have funded our platinum sponsor. And we're initiating the first Cambridge Roundtable of Companies so that we can look at a collaborative approach to rare diseases, but also with the advent of Brexit being the largest consortia in Europe, we want to be a strong voice for rare diseases. So, I think that's it.